Hello.
Hey, yeah, it's your producer, man. How's it going?
Oh, hey, boss. Yeah. Did you take a look at the script that I sent you?
Yeah, I read the script. Listen, pages 1 through, what is it here? 84?
That's the entire script.
Yeah, we're gonna have to rewrite all that.
I'm sorry, what?
It would help if you just hit Control A and then delete. That usually does it for me.
Okay, I guess we can write up a new one. What did you want to change about it?
Listen, you know that comic relief that we have?
The comic relief, which one?
Oh, you know what? I just took a look at the script right now. My notes, it's freaking everywhere. Sorry, I didn't mean to say comic relief. I meant to say comedy in general.
I'm sorry, what?
I meant to say comedy relief, meaning we're gonna get rid of all the comedy.
Removing the comedy. Okay, so removing comedy, we're taking a serious tone with this then?
Yeah, so we really wanted to keep this movie grounded. That's why we have a witch lady that turns into a bird that doesn't really show up until later on in the movie, in which case she goes to Mulan and says, "You go, girl." We think we're going to hit a lot of our target demographic with that.
Oh. Yeah, I guess we could write that in. Gonna be kind of weird, though. Who are we actually, targeting this to?
Well, we really want to stay current with everything. We want to be in the know. So we're trying to pitch this movie to everybody from 1 to 60 to 120. You know, anything that your grandma / little child / your parent / anybody else would watch.
I quit. Hello and welcome, you lovely people. Welcome to the Nerdom podcast, your one-stop shop for all things pop culture, cinema, and geek. Alright, so Mulan has just dropped, and when I say dropped, I mean it twofold. I mean that it's been released, and that people are mad about it. Now, there's a lot of different things that are wrong with it, not to mention the fact that it's politically charged because of what's happening in China right now. If you're watching this a few months down the road and don't know what I'm talking about, just look up the day, September in 2020 and you'll know what I'm talking about. But this is one of the final nails in the coffin for what Disney's been trying to do with their live action stuff. And what they've done with their live action movies is essentially defanged them. They took what made the animated film so iconic with people for generations and took that out, thinking that if they put real people in it, people will see it. And granted, I may have been disproven by The Lion King, but Disney has also shot themselves in the foot on that one because they've also said it's live action. Not live action. I'm sorry. Let me correct myself. It's animated. It's an 100% animated film, which... Okay. It's an animated film with really good-looking CG characters. Not live action, though. So that the track record still remains. Because, do any of you guys remember Sleeping Beauty from a few years ago? Not even a few years ago. With Emma Watson and... I don't even remember anybody else in that movie. But the thing about these live-action movies that they're taking out constantly with each edition that they're putting out is the movement. If you study animation at all, you know that movement tells a lot about a character. Movement through expressions, through their subtle bodily features that wouldn't necessarily be... expressed in live-action versions. Like in Lion King, all the animals look so weird because we don't know what expression to give them. They look weird because we're supposed to be going off of their tone and subtle body language. Like, we don't have... The thing about animals, they don't have eyebrows, so we can't tell if they're surprised, they can't tell if they're angry, we can't tell if they're happy, or any other emotion because we're supposed to pick up on the subtle clues that they put down. And yes, they did it, and they made a killing off of it. Let me put that out there. They did make a lot of money off of Lion King. And it sucks, because that means that they haven't learned their lesson. They are hearing the criticisms that we have put out there, but they aren't really caring about it until these last couple of bombs. Aladdin and Mulan being the two most recent, I'm pretty sure, unless they've managed to squeeze another one out that I wasn't aware of. But what they did with Mulan is they took all the aspects of the animated version, okay, and they ripped it away. They took all the comic relief, all of the relatability to the main character away. Because in an action movie, sure, we have Dave McClane, and even he has relatable moments, you know. In Die Hard, you know, he's an action star, and later on it seems like nothing can kill him, but he still has relatable features to him. He still gets annoyed when we get annoyed in the movie. He deals with situations reasonably. In Mulan, they took the action star format and then they changed it into this amalgamation of freaking a superhero, essentially, and that was what they planned on going with. It does not work. Mulan as a superhero does not work because that's not what the source material was. Mulan wasn't this mythological hero. She was this clumsy person. And I'm basing this off the animated film. The actual story of Mulan in Chinese history might differ. But this is weird. This entire movie was weird. Because whether you love or hate Eddie Murphy as Mushu, you still had a comic relief character that, you know, had a funny line here and there. Without him, this movie felt empty. It felt weird. And there's a difference between empowerment and overpower. Overpower, you're perfect at everything. You're perfect at everything you do. Empowered means that you have courage in everything you do. What Mulan did, the live-action version, they overpowered Mulan. They gave her everything right off the bat. She was perfect to begin with. She was capable of doing anything. And yes, they're great morals to instill in people that you can do anything or to be true to yourself. Like they eventually, that's the moral that they eventually go with in the live-action version. But it doesn't make sense why they have such an overpowered character. It completely ruins the relatability of Mulan. I don't see anybody going out there at 6 years old with a bow and arrow, firing at targets and getting each one down like Hawkeye. You just don't see that. And that's what Disney did wrong with this movie. They took an element, a relatable person in their cartoon, and they took it away. Not only that, but they took away all of their comic relief because they wanted to make it more serious or gritty. I don't even know what the decision process was on that front. But they took these comic relief characters away because they wanted a serious tone to it. And that doesn't fit the style at all. I mean, just looking at Mulan, you had these characters who were funny. And the three soldiers that was with Mulan for the main part of the movie, they were funny-ish. They had good slapstick and the usual stuff. But at least it was something entertaining that kept us engaged. In this, it was just boring. It was boring because all of the things that was relatable, I'm going to talk about relatability a lot right now, because they created this mythological story. And even in mythology, you had human problems with these people. And not even to mention the bad guy in this movie. it just the witch that was in this movie who could turn into a bird. We saw it in the trailer, and that she was. It seems like she was the only reason she was in there was to pat Mulan on the back and say, "You go, girl." And okay, you could have done a lot more with her. You could have had a tie-in, maybe. You could have connected this to the Maleficent verse. But you know what? Nah, we're just gonna have her in there for support. You know, we heard that we wanted to put in a support character, so we decided to put in the support character. That's not how it works. That's not how a support character is supposed to be. Mulan was good as an animated film. Why? Because with animation, you can tell multiple things with the way people carry themselves, the way people walk, people talk. Everything that would be said with words, you can actually see on the screen, and that's what made it work. With Mulan, you had these bumbling characters. Some people were caricatures of what a normal person would look like. Some people were portrayed in a prudish manner, like the matchmaker in the animated version. She was, you could tell that she was strict, that she was no nonsense. In the animated version, just by the way that she walked, the way that she sat down, the way that she moved. That is the type of stuff that you miss with live action, because you don't get all of that emotion coming in. And there's some character decisions that just don't make sense. Like the father, I understand that with Chinese culture, especially back during Mulan, the time era that they had set up, it was a man's world to deal with this stuff. But it came out of nowhere. I mean, the father was super supportive up to that point, and it does not make sense why he was such a prick at that point. And it just came out of left field. I understand that is something that they kind of needed to do so that they can match the animated film, because continuity is so important to these guys. But Mulan carried this sense of importance with it because it was relatable to people. It wasn't too crazy because, let's face it, there was mythological elements in the animated version. But in this version, they couldn't even get away with blood. So, if you were going to go serious and gritty with Mulan, I don't know why you didn't go all the way. If you wanted to make another Avengers movie, why didn't you do that? You could have done that. But no, they didn't. They tried to, they failed, and I think people have clung on to that. People have started to realize, okay, this isn't working. And Disney is taking a beating right now. Because with COVID hitting it, so they're losing money on their amusement parks. They're losing money on studios, just not being able to film anything, or at least not being able to film anything with very certain time frames. Like the Robert Pattinson Batman movie, that one got delayed because Robert Pattinson got diagnosed with COVID. So with that threat always being an underlying tone for Disney, they were losing money left and right, and especially with these live action movies coming out and not really making a huge turnaround with critics and audiences, they've gone through and one thing that they did, which to me when I first heard it sounded weird. It sounded weird to me because they just did it, and it sounded so blunt when I first heard it that I wasn't sure if it was true or not. But then I saw continual news sources saying yes, this was indeed happening. Disney, at the site of failures with Star Wars, failures with the live action movies, failures with just critic and audience acceptance in general, they're going through and firing social justice warriors within the company. When I heard that, it sounded bad, because that's the type of thing you see in a headline that says discrimination lawsuit. It seems like it would be a simple discrimination lawsuit, but no, because they're in the right to do it, because these movies have been failing. I don't know. To me, it sounds like it's easy enough to get a discrimination lawsuit out of it, but I'm not a lawyer. It could be harder to get that out rather than just accepting it. But Disney's been taking it hard, and they're trying a lot of different methods about trying to turn around the audience's view of them, and it does not look good. It does not look good. And with Mulan, just so many things were wrong with it. Not even including how they released it. Releasing it, I'm gonna give them a little bit of slack, because it's a cinematic movie. They had to sink a lot of money into it. So if you can't release it in theaters, which is their main source of revenue, okay, if you can't release it in theaters, you're going to lose a crap ton of money. So what they do, they release it on Disney Plus, but at a premiere fee. I don't need to explain to you how aggravating that is if it's going on Disney Plus. But other movies have done this in the past. Bill and Ted Face the Music, that was featured for pay. You could buy it and watch it, but it wasn't released on a streaming service. With Disney Plus, they released it on the streaming service, and they had to make their money back. There's no denying that. For my defense of Disney in all of this, Disney has to make their money back. They are bleeding out right now, just because of how this has been hurting them. So if they can't make a profit with this, they gotta do something with it. Because as audiences will really hate it, they're gonna have to figure out how to make this profit work. And although they're going through different methods and different avenues of getting back on the road, figuring out what works and what doesn't, they're figuring out that things are not going to be the same after COVID. They're absolutely not. And with good reason. I mean, if it took this much backlash to get them off the live action department, I think it's decent to expect them to make some changes in the future. Because why are we going through all these live action remakes over and over and over again if we have the animated versions that are just as good? If not, actually, not just as good, they're better. They're better in every way. They tell the story, and they engage with their demographic. Their children demographic. That's who they pitch to. Or at least that's what they say they're pitching to. But their Disney films, their animated films, were doing so well. That's what people recognize, and they're like, that's amazing. I want to see more of that. And out of everything here, I'm hoping, because it's kind of like a wish at this point to see Disney come out with their come out of this with the mentality that they're not going to do live action, but instead are going to move over to their hand-drawn animation department once again, which would be kind of awesome. It would be sick to see that hand-drawn animation style come back. And keep in mind, it costs the prices vary, because, mind you, it's expensive to make an animated film. Like, super expensive. Like, frames cost like hundreds of dollars just to make, if not thousands. But they're sinking like millions of dollars, like tens of millions of dollars into these live action movies. That same tens of millions of dollars could get sunk into their animation department, and they can put out animated Disney films once again. And there's some Disney movies that they could absolutely remake, and we would like to see them. Anything from the not anything from the 80s, but movies that kind of didn't do too well but gathered a cult following now, like Black Cauldron. That would be a freaking awesome remake, just in a hand-drawn style. Or if I hate to say it because I've been going against this the entire video, but live-action version of Black Cauldron, that would be kind of sick. Because the imagery in Black Cauldron is super dark. It's super... it's... Think about, like, Lord of the Rings for kids, you know? It's super dark and murky. All the settings are either super saturated or desaturated. And it was an environment that wasn't familiar to any of us. And, not to mention, they flipped the roles between damsel in distress and the protagonist. Because in the usual Disney fashion, you would have like this man come in, and he was kind of think about like Ken Barbie doll, because that's about as much personality as they got. Like all the princesses in the Disney pre-2000s Disney princes were kind of 2D, like two-dimensional. Although they're cartoons, so they're already 2D. But I mean 2D personality-wise. So they had these personalities that didn't really stick out at all. Prince Eric kind of had a little bit of a personality. He had a few lines of dialogue and stuff like that. But these Disney princesses kind of had very subtle variation to them. There wasn't like a lot of attention given to them. And with Black Cauldron, what they did was the traditional depiction of a Disney princess is what you would traditionally, I'm not saying this is what they all are like, but traditionally they were depicted as these dainty damsels in distress. But in Black Cauldron, the protagonist, the hero, was dainty. He was all the traits that you would apply to a Disney princess was applied to him, and it was actually kind of funny. Minus the whining. So, like, I don't know. The yearning that Disney princesses have to, like, be free or, like, go above the sea like Ariel or, I don't know what most of the motivations are. But, all those, the yearning that they had, like, in their song forms, in Black Cauldron, the guy was just straight up whining throughout the entire movie, and it got old quick. But if they redid that movie, if they redid it and they fixed that, I feel like it could be a lot better, and they could flip the roles a little bit. Like the princess could be the protagonist, the one saving the guy, or even if they kept the main roles the same, they could come out with a very different movie that plays to the nostalgia of the parents. Because I wasn't around when Black Cauldron was made. No, I was born way after that. So seeing Black Cauldron for me was the second generation, either second or third, because 80s, about second or third generation of people seeing that movie. And honestly, it was kind of it was a depiction of the 80s, but they already came out with 80s remakes at this point, like Dark Cauldron, Dark Crystal came out with their TV show on Netflix, and it turned out pretty well. It was a pretty good show. So I feel like they could have done that. They could go back to their original properties and remake them, actually make newer versions of it, rather than going with their Disney princess lines and trying to remake all that stuff and get it to a selling point. With that, it's too soon. It's too soon for those movies to be remade. The only reason you should remake a movie is if it's too old. Perfect example of this is True Grit. True Grit, it was a John Wayne film, so already it's old. It's like 60s, maybe 70s, all the way back there. Mulan's like 1990s. So there's a huge gap between those. And with True Grit, you stayed close to the source material to the point that you were intrigued by the new movie even more than the old one, because the new movie added things, but they kept the main story the same. What Mulan did was they took the original story and they changed it. They changed it a lot. They took out Mushu, so all of that stuff, all of the contributions that Mushu did, were taken out completely. And when you think about it, when you really think about it, Mushu contributed a lot to the story in terms of being able to further the plot, support Mulan. He was the guy who lit the... he was the guy who lit the firework that took out the main Mongol. And just... there was a lot of things that he contributed. And granted, you could probably replace him and not really notice. But they didn't do that. And another thing is, they took out the songs. Now, the songs, depending on where you stand on Disney musicals, just what side you stand on, you have to admit, songs have their purpose. Songs relay information that normally we would have to work at for a long period of time to actually get to. Like, we could have entire arguments summed up into a song, and combine that with the animation that they put out with the body language, you could get through a storyline really quickly and not even skip a beat. And it just meshes because you blend it so well. And it's Disney, so they absolutely know how to do this. They've been doing it for years. For decades, they've been able to do this type of work. But when you take out the songs out of a motion picture like this, where they were the reason why Mulan was so iconic, was because I'll make a man out of you, my reflection goes, I can't even, bad example that I can't really think of any songs, but the main training song, Make a Man Out of You, it's so iconic that if on YouTube you can find that, and it's like 12 million views on there. And why is that? Because it's so iconic with Mulan. When you take that out of Mulan, what do you get? You get a shell of Mulan. You get, that was sort of the story, but, I'm missing these essential parts to it. That is what's mind-boggling to me, because it just does not work with what they're trying to do. They remade this movie, and they didn't do it justice with Mulan. Oh man, it just breaks my heart when I see this happen, because it's been happening for a while. There's been something empty about these Disney remakes, because they're remakes. They're not telling anything new. They might add a couple of things, like this dumb twist at the end of the live-action Aladdin, where it turns out Genie was into a woman and had a family with her and all that stuff. Okay, did we really need that? I mean, granted, the straight-to-DVD sequels Disney put out weren't great, but did we really need that from Genie? I don't know. It didn't make sense at the time why they were doing it, and it still doesn't make sense why they don't put out original creations. Because with Frozen, it was such a big hit. I thought that Disney would learn their lesson with their creations with Frozen, because it was based on the Snow Queen, which, yes, it is based on something, so it's not completely original, but they added their own elements to it, and it worked out. It worked out. It was in essence, it was an original creation. And I thought they would learn from it because it did so well. It did amazingly well. But they didn't, and they continue to do live-action remakes. I'm hoping, at the end of 2020, they learn their lesson. They know not to do these remakes anymore because they're just not working out. And Disney wants to make these profits again. They want to get back into the good graces of people, because as a business, it doesn't make sense for them to continue going against what their customers want. Unless their numbers show differently, like Lion King did, and it came out with a great box office, but reviews were low. So stuff like that is going to kind of put it off. But for the main part, they removed all the elements that made Mulan iconic. And when you do that, you leave a husk of what was. You take out Eddie Murphy, and it's dishonor on you.
Dishonor on your cow!
Stop!
It's just dishonorable. And this movie, it came out at a time that I think this quarantine has been hitting all of us hard. But for Disney, I think this might be a wake-up call for them. Because they need to figure out what they're doing, how to achieve what they want, and actually come up with something that is identifiable to their target audience. But more importantly, I feel like they need to pick a target audience. Because most of the decisions that they make don't necessarily have a target audience attached to it. Because you think about it, who are they pitching these movies to? I mean, like, they're tiptoeing the line between not being offensive to anybody. But at that point, if you're not offensive to anybody, and you're not taking risks, and you're not taking up the chance that you might fail, then you're going to fail because it's not going to be identifiable. Nobody can get upset at a blank canvas. If you paint something on there, you're going to get somebody who dislikes it. You're going to get somebody who likes it. And that's just how it goes. By not picking a side on this, you're really just letting it all fall by the wayside. And I hate to see that happen to Disney. I hate to see it happen because they're a juggernaut. They're supposed to be able to punch through these obstacles and know how to get good content out of this stuff. And they've been around for a while, so they already know what it's like in entertainment. But they're not taking the chances necessary to have a lasting impact on their audience. And that's essentially where they're going wrong. And for Disney, I think they've been doing this for a while. I know they're going to learn from this. This is going to be a miss, but in the long run, they're gonna come back with something better. Already, we're hearing reports that season 2 of The Mandalorian is going to be debuting soon, and honestly, that's great news because for as many misses as Disney has, as long as we get those hits that people love, like The Mandalorian or Frozen 2 or all their original titles, that's when they hit their stride. When they go original. By redoing what you do in the past, it's not going to do anything, and it's going to further just make the other movies look better in comparison. Because that's what they are at this point. They're better in comparison because they were good. And I know that's oversimplified for the argument that I'm making here, but these Disney movies need to take a note and stick to the original. Sure, you have the ability to create live-action versions of it, but do you really need to? Gonna leave you on that one because, well, we've run at the end of our time here. For those of you listening on Anchor or Spotify or Overcast or whatever other podcast format that you listen to, please follow along to see any new updates to the channel, to the any new episodes that come out. For those of you listening on YouTube, I'll post a couple videos over here for you guys to check out and take a look at. Any of you helps. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys again on the next video. Thank you all. Good night.